Should be straightforward, right? No, not at all. And this went on for, believe it or not, about a year and a half. And at this point, I was really starting to like lose my, Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. So I'm gonna bring you something a bit different for today's video. I'm gonna tell you a story about a banking nightmare I had in France and some of the lessons that I learned as a result of all the chaos and hassle that ensued from this. So let's get right into it. So guys, to set the scene a little bit. So those of you that follow the channel know that I currently live in Spain, but before living in Spain, I lived in France, and I lived in France for about 2 years. And while I was living in France, I took the opportunity to maximize all the different finance and investing products that are on offer in France. I've talked a bit about them on this channel, one of them being a PEA or PEA in French. And what that essentially allows you to do is save some money on dividend and capital gains tax if you keep that account open for more than 5 years. I've done a video where I talk about it in detail, and I'll leave the link up at the top. Anyway, so this PEA account was actually the beginning of my investing journey. It was the first brokerage account I opened with my bank in France, which I won't name throughout this video. So I opened this PEA account, aware of all the conditions that came with it. I decided I'm gonna not touch this money for a while. I'm gonna leave it there and just, invest the money and let it grow. Okay, so I opened it in about January 2019, and then of course moved to Spain later in the year. Now, under French law, if you've opened a PEA in France and you leave the country, you're not obliged to close the account. You can keep your PEA with your bank and essentially just leave it there. You can't open anything new from abroad, but if you open something while you're in France and you left, you can keep it. However, my bank decided that it was the exception to the rule and decided that no, I couldn't keep my account, I had to close it. So this is obviously a problem. I was thinking, oh, I've invested in all these companies, done all my research, all my analysis. I wanted to invest in these companies long term. What am I going to do now? So what I decided to do was go to the same bank in Spain, as they operate in Spain as well as in France, and decided, okay, let me just shift my investments over from France to Spain. So move my investments from the investing account I have in France to an investment account in Spain. Should be straightforward, right? No, not at all. So I thought this being with the same bank would make things easier, but actually made things more complicated. There was zero communication between both banks. I was constantly going between the two of them saying, oh, has this been done? Has this been done? What do you need? What do you need? And, the Spanish bank was saying, okay, we need this. And the French bank just wasn't doing anything. And every time I called, it was the same story. And this went on for, believe it or not, about a year and a half. 1 whole year and a half. So around about the year point, I wasn't particularly concerned. I was like, okay, they can't force me to close the account. They can't force me to sell my investments. This transfer is in progress and there's nothing more I can do on my side. It's on the bank to do what they need to do, and all I can do is follow up with them. Then, of course, I made the decision that I was going to make the property purchase. So given that I'd had no luck in transferring the stocks across, that I wanted to use some of that money to finance the down payment for the property that I bought, I thought, okay, let's just get this thing over and done with once and for all, and let's close the account. So around about September, I gave the orders to the French bank, look, I've sold all my investments, please close the account. So I give them a month, 2 months, because I'm signed in for my property in November. They've got 2 months to get this closed. I send, my recommandé, the signed and tracked letter and everything, get the receipt to say that they've received it. And no, the money doesn't arrive. I call the bank and I'm just like, what's going on? And the same story of, oh yeah, it's not been done yet. The technical team haven't done it. And at this point, I was really starting to lose my at this point I was getting really angry because not only had this dragged on for a year and a half, but this was starting to put a real estate transaction in jeopardy because they weren't going to be able to get me the money on time. And so the same story just went on and on and on, just calling and calling, and eventually by some miracle got it to the highest level of manager, someone who was willing to give their name and someone who was willing to put me in contact with someone at a high level to address the situation personally, because it had gotten to the point where I was really at a loss of what to do. And so despite them not getting me the money in time for me to sign my property, fortunately I found an alternate solution in the meantime. Eventually got my money all transferred across to my Spanish account after a year and a half of just back and forward. So anyways, now that the rant's over, we can go into some of the lessons learned. Because as much as this was, I believe, and I maintain to this day, the bank's fault, there were things that I could have done that would have prevented some of these problems from coming up. So whether you're living in France or whether you're living in another country and you're looking at, managing your money overseas, or you're perhaps moving abroad, here are some of the lessons and takeaways that I got from this terrible experience that will hopefully prevent you from ending up in a similar situation one day. So here we go. So first of all is just being prepared for the bureaucratic nightmare of anything finance related, especially if you're in a country like France where bureaucracy is everywhere and there is a high probability that something will go wrong. So when it comes to handling bureaucracy, if you're asked for a list of documents, make sure you have those exact documents as best you can. Make sure you have copies, make sure that every form is filled out perfectly without any mistakes. Double check it before you send everything off, because if you send something off and something's not right, then it's obviously going to slow down the whole process, whether it's opening an account, closing an account. And you've got your own timelines, you've got deadlines and pressure to get things done. So don't create obstacles for yourself. Keep the path as clear as possible by making sure every document, every form is filled out correctly. Everything is sent, tracked and signed, so that if you need to complain, everything is well documented and you have a clear paper trail that shows everything. Next, particularly if you're opening a bank account or you're getting access to a new financial product, is always read the small print. It's a real pain, but it is super important. Like in this case, because I didn't read the small print when I opened that account, I didn't realize that for some reason the bank decided to override French law and force me to close the account. When you read the small print, though most of the time it's not going to be important to you, it is good that you have it in mind so that you can plan and consider for every possible eventuality, particularly if you're someone who's moving around a lot, because if you're moving around a lot, that will come to that on the next point, and you're gonna need to be aware of what you can and can't do with your different bank accounts. And so now coming around to that, so if you are gonna leave a country, make sure you do know where you stand in terms of your bank account and any investing accounts you have open in that account. Make sure that you've contacted your bank well in advance to ask if there's any action required. Make sure you've read the small print well in advance so that you know that if you do leave the country, what action you need to take, if there's any action you need to take. Because in my case, because I didn't do this and I just assumed everything would continue as normal, I missed out on the chance, this would have avoided a headache, that I could have actually transferred all those investments to another pure account with a different bank in France, and I would have been able to keep it open. I wouldn't have been forced to close it as I was with the bank that I stayed with. But, that's ultimately on me in the end. And last, when you're looking at investing products, whether it's a tax advantage broker account or whether it's a deposit with a minimum term, make sure you do plan long term, like 10, 20 years. Know when exactly you're going to need to see this money again. Because, as I say, like this money, because of this hassle with the bank, money that I should have had immediately, I didn't see until almost 2 years later. So being aware of what money you need in the short term, in the medium term, and what you do have set aside for your long-term plans for your future, like your retirement or whatever. So really just having a solid financial plan when it comes to investing, knowing what money you can allocate in the short, medium term. What are your goals in the short, medium term, and what money are you going to need for it? And is there going to be money that you need in the short or medium term to meet those goals, or is it okay if you put that money in a long-term account and you don't see it for the next 10, 20 years, whatever? So guys, I hope you found this story helpful, and I hope that some of the lessons I've shared there at the end will prevent one of you at least from having similar troubles that I had with my bank in France. So leave a comment and let me know if you're moving around a lot, if you've had any trouble with your banks, with your accounts, with your investments, or if you think there's any other lessons or any tips that you can share to help people with this mess as well. By all means, please leave them in the comments. Till next time, guys, I'll see you on the next one, and let's get this money.